Hello, this is George Whitten, founder and editor of Worthy News. The title of this episode is called The Simchat Torah War Part 4. Is this a Psalm 83 war? It is Friday, October 20, 2023, and in this episode, I'm actually just answering a question that a reader submitted. Is this the Psalm 83 war? And so kind of to go through this, we have to kind of know a little bit about current history and a little bit about past history. In 2006, a very interesting thing took place. There was a war with Israel, with Lebanon, and it was from July 12th to August 14th, so it lasted about a month. And in the middle of this, on July 26th, the New York Times published a story that they found a book of Psalms, and this book of Psalms was the Irish equivalent to the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, in the middle of this, they called this the greatest find ever found in a European bog. And it was opened up to Psalm 83 in the Latin Vulgate. Now, Psalm 83 is a psalm that talks about the nations plotting together to wipe off the name of Israel. As we find out later in history, even though it was open to Psalm 83 in Latin is actually Psalm 84. So there was something that was a little twist in that story. But in Psalm 83, here is the Psalm of Asaph. So Asaph is a seer, someone that we find out as a seer in Chronicles. And in verse 4, they come, let us wipe them off from being a nation, that the name of Israel be remembered no more. So here's a plot, and it continues on with one heart they plotted together. And it gives you a list of nations. It gives you a list of Edom, the Ishmaelites, Moab, the Hagarites, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, and the Philistines, and with the people of Tyre, and Assyria has joined them. And they've helped the sons of Lot. And Selah means to pause and think about this. Well, so if we look at a map of the nations that were involved, we see that these nations, Gebal, Tyre, Assyria, that these nations actually were involved in a war that happened in 1948. There's some people that think that it didn't. Well, the reality is that this did actually happen in 1948. The problem is that the prophecy isn't necessarily completely fulfilled. It's something that very often, I think, in prophecy can be fulfilled once, twice. There can be many layers. But in this particular prophecy, these same nations that are mentioned, it's not actually happening today. We actually don't see Egypt involved. We actually don't see Jordan involved. In 1948, we did see all these nations involved. Now, the Ishmaelites is at that time was Saudi Arabia, and Saudi Arabia did send a faction that was under Egyptian control. The Lebanese, Tyre and Gebal, the Lebanese army was a very small. It was a kind of interesting dynamic that I believe Lebanon was founded in 1943, 1944. It's one of those years, and in the founding of that country, they debated whether or not to fight. And so they actually sent one of the smallest factions of the army that were in that coalition, but it was mostly Egypt, Syria, and at that time, Transjordan. So Transjordan actually is a lot bigger than Jordan today. It actually, included a little bit of Iraq and a little bit of Saudi Arabia, and then it was carved out a little differently later on in history. But the bottom line, there was an element to this that was taking place in 1948. However, I think that it's going to play out again because the same area is actually the same borders of the Gog-Magog war. That there are nations that should be mentioned in the Gog-Magog war that are not mentioned, that somehow got dealt with. I believe that this actually is dealt with in the Daniel 11 war. I covered this in an earlier episode called the Simchat Torah War Part 2. It's right around the 20-minute mark. If you want to watch that, I think it'll give you a little bit more insight to how I think Psalm 83 may play out again in the future. But in this passage, and really the context of this and is what we should understand how it could apply today. So do to them as with Midian, like the nobles like Oreb and Zeeb, like all the princes like Zev and Zimmunah. And in this passage, there's a very unique little kind of nuance here. You have to actually know what is going on here. And this is actually referring to the time that Gideon was fighting the Midianites. And in that passage of Judges 8, you can read the entire chapter, but I'm just going to focus on one verse. In Judges 8:21, it says, "So Zebah and Zalmunna said, 'Rise up and kill us, so as a man is, so is his strength.' So Gideon arose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna and took the crescent ornaments." Now, the crescent ornaments is kind of a unique word because why? The very symbol of Islam is a crescent moon. So here is buried within the Psalm 83 passage actually the symbol of Islam. What's the purpose of the word? Well, if you look at this, it says, "Fill their faces with shame that they may seek your name." Well, what's the greatest shame that a Muslim could face is actually being defeated by a Jew who they look at as, scum of the earth. So God what I believe is going to be using is the Israeli army, the Jewish people to defeat them. Why? That they may seek your name, that they may know that you, whose name alone is Lord, are the Most High over all the earth. So, in a nutshell, we have to recognize that, and whenever you look at prophecy, whenever you look at things, you have to look at the big picture. What's the big picture in prophecy? Well, the big picture is how is God using, what is God doing, how God is redeeming mankind. That has to be the ultimate fulfillment, because that's really what we're playing out right now in the grand scheme of things, is the great battle between good and evil, the great battle between right and wrong, and but ultimately it's to show people the truth of how God promised there would be a Messiah. His name was Jesus, his name was Yeshua, that he came, died on the cross, just as he said, rose again from the dead. So now we have victory over death, and now he's preparing a kingdom, and he's getting ready to usher in a kingdom. So in that process, we're sitting here and we're watching how is God going to redeem all the nations, because he's saying, I'm going to set up a kingdom. It's going to be from every tribe, nation, and tongue. That he's going forth, that the plan of God is working this out. So in one essence, to the reader's question, is this the Psalm 83 war? No, it's not. It may have been fulfilled in 1948. I believe it could be a future fulfillment in the near future. But in essence, what was the purpose of the war? Was that they would seek his name. And in one respect, I think that there could be a somewhat of a fulfillment, in the sense that as Israel goes forward, I believe they'll be victorious. And it won't be an easy victory. It'll be something that we need to pray for. But in the essence of it all is that they may seek the name of the Lord. So that's what we really need to be praying for, the salvation of Israel, the salvation of the Palestinians, the salvation of the entire Middle East. God's got a plan. And you're alive for such a time as this to kind of usher in that plan. So I hope I answered that question. If you have any more questions, just send them off. If you don't get our Worthy brief, sign up for them. It's free. It doesn't cost anything. Until next time, this is George Whitten reporting with Worthy News.